largest content contributor to PBS LearningMedia. All right, I want to introduce our speakers tonight. The first will be kicking off with Nikki Siriani. Nikki is a part of the GBH Education department that I'm a part of. After many years of working with children as a therapeutic mentor and preschool teacher, Nikki received her master's degree in child studies and human development with a focus on educational media. And since joining GBH in 2018, she has been involved in marketing, outreach, and development for several successful projects, including Pinkalicious and Peterific, Molly of Denali, Design Squad Latinx, and the Civic Action Program, Youth Stand Up. Then we have Dr. Susan Letourneau. And Susie, not Susan. Susie collaborates with educators and designers to develop and study museum experiences that emphasize play, exploration, and creative expression as avenues for STEM learning. She has over 10 years experience conducting interdisciplinary research on children's learning and caregiving child interactions in science centers, children's museums, and other informal environments. She holds a PhD in cognitive neuroscience from Brandeis University. And then we are very pleased to have with us also Dr. Alex Mejia. Dr. Mejia is an associate professor with joint appointment in the Department of Bicultural, Bilingual Studies and the Department of Biomedical and Chemical Engineering at the University of Texas at San Antonio. His current work seeks to analyze and describe the assets, tensions, contradictions, and cultural collisions many Latino students experience in engineering through testimonials. He holds a BS and MS in metallurgical engineering and a PhD in engineering education from Utah State University. Welcome to all of our presenters. So the plan for tonight is very straightforward. Nikki is going to kick it off and introduce two projects, Design Maker and Design Squad Latinx. And then we're going to have kind of a panel discussion that Nikki will lead with Susie and Alex, and we invite you to be a part of that. I'll come back on for a few final remarks, and then we'll take it from there. All right, so thank you very much, and take it away, Nikki.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. I'm so excited to be here with you all this evening and share two new programs from Design Squad. Design Squad has a long history of creating engineering programs that seek to make engineering engaging and fun and accessible to as many kids as possible out there. And I'm really excited to share with you these two new programs, which are, as Carolyn mentioned, completely free for you to use that have recently been developed. So first, I'm going to start with Design Squad Maker, which was a collaboration of GBH Boston and the New York Hall of Science. Next slide, please. So what did Design Squad Maker? Why Design Squad Maker? Why did we start out with this project? We know that kids who get the opportunity to have making experiences get this great chance to bring together, science thinking skills and this opportunity to help solve real world meaningful problems to them. But we also know that kids need supports and tools to help them kind of have these meaningful experiences, especially in different settings that they get the opportunity to do these activities. So we wanted to kind of create a program that could help kids in the various after-school settings that they attend pursue engineering design challenges and projects. So we wanted to develop hands-on digital resources to help them with these projects, but also research what supports kids and their caregivers need in order for them to have access to and engage in these engineering design activities and projects. So next slide, please. So what we did is we undertook a design-based research process where we did a series of research activities to help kind of inform what we should create. So we did a series of rapid prototyping of hands-on activities to figure out what were the best ways to kind of introduce families to the steps of the design process. And we learned that quick intros to the design process led by facilitators, and then kind of a hands-off letting families explore the design process on their own really worked in these museum settings. We also developed and tested a series of workshops for makerspaces or museum settings, a suite of take-home activities that helped families kind of find time and space and materials to engage in engineering activities at home, and to kind of meet some of the challenges families expressed or barriers that they mentioned when they said they wanted to kind of have these experiences but lacked certain things. And we also developed an app to kind of figure out what were the best kind of digital tools that could be used to help kids as they move between different out of school time settings and home settings, but wanted to continue engineering or projects. We also got feedback from 10 different makerspace sites across the US, and further kind of iterated and developed on our materials to kind of meet some of their needs, including building more flexibility into the programs for different kind of makerspace settings, such as having drop-in options or not drop-in options, or even exploring some virtual options as makerspaces were faced with the pandemic. And we took all of this feedback into account as we were continuing to develop this program. So next slide, please. We did two kind of different studies to gauge the impact of Design Squad Maker. The first was a pilot study conducted by the New York Hall of Science in September. It was done in 3 locations: New York Hall of Science, Decatur Makers, and Pittsburgh Children's Museum. And the goal was to really see, do these materials, are they working at helping families continuing to engage in the engineering design process after they had this experience at a makerspace workshop? And luckily, we found out that yes, these materials were helping families continue to engage in these kind of making activities when they went home, and helping them kind of address some of the barriers that I mentioned earlier of finding time and space and materials to do these kinds of activities. And currently, our summative evaluation is underway by the Concord Evaluation Group, where we're having 8 different museums and makerspaces across the country run this program and kind of gauging impact. And I'll be happy to share the evaluation results once we have those in. Next slide, please. So what is it that we created after all of that research and development? What is it that we made? So the Design Squad Maker Toolkit is really comprised of 3 main components. It includes workshops and themes for in makerspaces. So families would come to a makerspace or a museum and they'd participate in a themed workshop where they'd be introduced to the app, downloaded for free on their phone. The app then kind of serves as this tie between the makerspace experience and then can also travel at home with the families, where kids can continue using it to work and iterate upon their projects or start new ones. And then they leave these workshops with a suite of take-home materials that helps them to continue use the design process at home, including continuing using the app, and other ways to kind of inspire creativity and offer some ideas for engaging in more engineering design activities. So next slide, please. So the Design Squad Maker Workshop Guide is kind of a collection of everything a facilitator would need from start to finish to running a workshop. It includes kind of the general, what do you need to prepare to lead the session, material ideas for your workshop. It gives you kind of scripts and an outline and timing of the way the workshop should kind of flow. It really has everything that you need in there for leading these workshops, and all the workshops kind of follow a similar pattern, starting with an introduction to the design process for families and a welcome to the workshop, an explanation of what the workshop theme is for that day. And there are several different themes for facilitators to choose from. Then it leads into a quick overview of the app, and then it kind of gives families the time and space to work independently on these projects with the facilitator floating around and helping support them as they do so. You'll see here a diagram of the design process that we use for this project, and families are introduced to this as well. And the app also mirrors the same design process, as well as has prompts for helping kids as they go through the design process on their own. Another feature that I want to point out in these workshop guides, which I love, is also within the guides, there are several different tips for facilitators, including just general facilitation tips and best practices. There are caregiver tips for ways to engage caregivers as they're supporting their kiddos through the design process and through their builds. And there are also younger sibling tips, because we know a lot of times, especially in makerspace settings, there are often younger siblings who are there. So it gives ideas for ways to engage them as well. And I will say Design Squad Maker is targeted for kids ages 8 to 13, but I think it really helps having those younger sibling tips to engage younger kids as well. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there are different themes also within the Design Squad Maker materials. The 4 themes that we've created are animals, school, clothing, and home. And through testing, we found out that these themes were really great at helping to kind of scaffold the experience for kids and families, helping them give them guardrails to the projects that they were creating, but still allowing them the space to find really meaningful problems that they wanted to solve within each of these themes. And they're open enough that I think there's still plenty of room for creativity and for kids to bring, different kind of meaning to the different themes for them as well. So what you'll find in these materials is you'll see in the workshop themes document on the left, a small swap icon. And what that means is you'll have the main facilitation guide, and every time you see the swap icon, that's a place you can swap that section for whatever theme that you're doing for that day, which makes it really easy to have the same structure for how you're running the guide, but this opportunity to customize for different themes that might be more appropriate for your audience, but also to give you the opportunity to do these materials again, but just with a different theme, so it's still fresh and new for the youth that you're working with. Also, there's a theme template guide in here as well. So you have the opportunity to customize and create your own theme. Like say your makerspace or museum wants to do a theme related to Space Week or some other theme that's going on. There's the opportunity for you to create your own customization because you know your audience best, and then you can make this program really work for your target audience. Next slide, please. So in addition to the actual workshop experiences, we also have these other kind of wraparound supports that really make this a fully fledged experience for the people who participate in it. So there's the Design Squad Maker app, which families will all be encouraged to download as soon as they come to the workshop, and it is free, as I mentioned again, in the Apple app and Google Play stores. And what the app does is it provides a scaffolded experience for youth and guides them through each step of the design process. So as they're starting out a project, it gives them a short animation about what happens in any given step of the design process, and then kind of tools within the app to help them as they organize their thoughts and their project that they're working on. There's also ways to document their project and make notes about their project, which is great. And they're also encouraged to iterate and go back to any step of the design process at any point within the app, so they can keep refining and working on their project until they're really satisfied with their final result. And then there's also more spaces in there for them to create new projects, so they could have a whole project library of their different engineering design masterpieces. So in addition to the app, families will also leave with a set of take-home materials. There's some caregiver supports. So we have a caregiver's tip sheet, which give caregivers information about, why making, why is it important, how can you help your child do making activities. And we also have a caregiver's role handout, which give caregivers different roles that they can play as they support. They could be a documentarian, they could be a cheerleader for their child, and just gives them other ways that they can get involved in the engineering design process. Families also leave with a Keep Making at Home booklet. And this booklet is really wonderful. It starts with this great flow chart right here, which helps families decide, what kind of project, or you take it and figure out what project might be good for you to do in that moment, depending on how much time you have, how much materials you have. It gives you tips for how to conquer some of those barriers if you're facing them. And there are also quick engineering challenges in there as well. So you don't have time to use the app to start a new project from the beginning. You can use this Making Home at booklet to do quick, shorter builds and challenges that are in there for you as well. So next slide, please. Okay, I think that is an overview of Design Squad Maker. The whole program and all the materials are available at pbslearningmedia.org, and the apps are available at Apple Store and the Google Play Store. I'm now going to turn my attention to Design Squad Latinx, which is another program, which is new from Design Squad. It's a little bit earlier. Design Squad Maker is completely done and published. Latinx, we're gearing up towards publishing. We should have all the materials published by the end of this month, but we're really excited about this collection as well, as we have been asked a lot of times to create new resources in Spanish, and we're really excited to offer this collection. I'm just going to start with a quick note. We use the term Latinx throughout this program as a gender inclusive term that recognizes the contributions of non-binary and LGBTQ+ people of Latin American roots. The purposeful use of this term Latinx is to affirm that engineering is for all, whether you identify as Latinx, Latina, Latino, Latine, Boricua, Chicano, American, or any other part of another community. No matter how you choose to identify, we feel that Design Squad Latinx is for you. So next slide, please. So why Design Squad Latinx? Why this project? Here are just some statistics that kind of give you a glimpse into the underrepresentation of Hispanic and Latino peoples in the STEM job cluster. And these statistics become even more apparent when we look at Latina women in the STEM and engineering field, just historic underrepresentation compared to kind of population numbers, especially in the US. So clearly there is a pipeline issue, and there is an issue with how we are teaching and presenting STEM to these students. And we wanted to seek to create a program that was intentionally created for this population to create better engagement in engineering and offer new resources that approached STEM in a slightly different way, which I'll go into next. Next slide, please. So Design Squad Latinx is a new bilingual engineering program for Latinx youth ages 10 to 13, as well as a new conceptual framework for a strengths-based approach to STEM education. So this project specifically focuses on Latinx communities. It encourages Latinx youth to draw on their funds of knowledge regarding engineering, and I'll dig deeper into what funds of knowledge means a little bit, and then Alex, Professor Mejia, will talk even more about what funds of knowledge means even later on. Design Squad Latinx is a community-wide effort to increase STEM opportunities and resources for Latinx students. And our goal, or one of our goals, is to also raise the profile of engineering in Latinx communities. So next slide, please. So funds of knowledge, this is our definition, working definition for this project. This is the accumulated knowledge, skills, talents, and abilities that people develop over time from life experiences with their families, communities, and culture. Often the funds of knowledge of students of color is not valued in the educational system. And our goal is to kind of bring this knowledge, celebrate this knowledge, and make connections between this knowledge and engineering education. And you'll see our graphic here kind of representing visually what this can mean. I mean, we have a child in the middle, and some of these things that might not be considered traditional forms of education, but are certainly acquired knowledge and things that this person knows about, learned about from community members. Next slide, please. So our conceptual framework, this is kind of how we tie together both funds of knowledge and engineering and STEM education in general. How we outline it is the first step in bringing this kind of approach to engineering education is to first discover it. Kids can use their funds of knowledge in engineering, but they first have to recognize that they have funds of knowledge and what those funds of knowledge are. And educators can help play a role in this by eliciting kids' funds of knowledge. Once this knowledge is discovered, we have to value it. So they should be recognized and appreciate this knowledge as a source of resources that can be used when addressing problems through the engineering design process. And lastly, this knowledge should be applied when kids are creating and tackling engineering challenges. Next slide, please. So that's kind of our foundation of how we started Design Squad Latinx, but how did we actually go about creating the activities and resources? We started by doing something called asset mapping. Often you hear about people doing something called a needs assessment, which is kind of approaching communities and students from a deficit approach. But asset mapping, on the other hand, kind of looks at a community and says, here are the strengths. We know they have a series of strengths and things to be celebrated and that can be used. So we conducted this in our 3 communities that we're working with to develop these programs in Rhode Island, California, and Puerto Rico. And we had kids self-identify their strengths of themselves and the strengths of their families. And then we had them tell community stories. And we coded all of those to kind of find common themes that kids identified as assets that they had, their community had, and that their families had. We then took all of those themes and we used them as the foundation of our materials. So we found what it was common, and I'll kind of explain later on when I explain the materials. For example, though, something that came up a lot was the environment and animals, and caring a lot about the environment and being really good at taking care of pets and caring about their pets. So we added a lot of animals into the materials, and you'll see later on, we have clients, and some of those clients are sometimes animals because that just clearly resonated a lot with the kids and were identified as a major strength. So after we kind of took all of these assets and created a rough draft, so to speak, of our materials, we did a lot of prototype testing in Rhode Island, California, Massachusetts, and Puerto Rico. And we ended up doing 3 rounds of prototype testing where we would have kids in after-school programs try out the activities and then give us feedback. We were especially looking at, are these materials working to elicit kids' funds of knowledge, or are they acknowledging that they're using their funds of knowledge during these engineering challenges? So we did 3 different rounds of kind of testing out new activities and seeing what's working, what was not working. And that kind of culminated in our pilot study, which was done in Rhode Island, California, and Puerto Rico, where we had them do a partial run of the program to kind of see how these are working together as a series of different activity sessions. And again, we got a lot more wonderful feedback from the pilot about what was working and what was not working. And that's kind of where we're at right now, is making your final edits to the materials. And we're gearing up for our implementation study, which is just beginning as we speak right now. And what we're doing for our implementation study is we're taking Design Squad Latinx and we're comparing it to a comparable engineering program to see how it compares to another bilingual engineering program, to see what the results might be of doing Design Squad Latinx compared to a different engineering program. And again, I'll be happy to share those results with anyone who's interested once that's complete. So next slide, please. So what have we created? So Design Squad Latinx consists of a series of 4 different modules, we're calling them, that can be used in any order that works for your program. So you can pick and choose which modules you want to use to customize them or tailor them to your needs in your program. So the 4 different modules are Discover the Design Process, which is a 2-session module, and it's kind of a quick either introduction to the design process or a review of the design process if your students are familiar with it. And it starts by a series. The first day is a series of decoding clues to kind of figure out the different steps of the design process. So kids get to be kind of cipher experts and decode the different steps and figure out how to put them in the right order. And then the second day is just a quick build. So they're actually using the design process, which they just learned the different series of steps to. Our second module, which again does not have to be in any particular order, I'm just calling it the second one, is Pulleys, which is the 3-session module. Day 1, students learn about pulleys and what they are, and they do a quick build all about raising flags to help a community with the celebration. After that quick build, then they have 2 days to work on a more in-depth pulley engineering challenge, where they get to select a different client that they want to help by building a pulley system for them. Our next module is the Create Your Own Engineering Challenge. And this is the module where students get the chance to not just, in other modules, we've given them the engineering challenges. Here, they get to kind of pick every single step of the design process, starting from identifying a client and a problem, all the way through sharing their solution in their own engineering challenge. And they have 3 days to work on that project. And lastly, we've created a showcase module, which is a 2-session module where kids get the opportunity to tell their engineering and design story. So not just, build something, but also figure out how to communicate to their community, here's what I did and here's why I did what I did. And we help them kind of craft their engineering story and give them tools for sharing that with their community. Important things about the modules, as I've said before, everything comes in both languages. It's fully bilingual. And you see examples of two of the guides right here, one for Discover the Design Process and one for Pulleys. And then some important features to note about the Latinx modules. One thing I wanted to point out is the client cards. Something we found from asset mapping was so many kids talked about helping their community, helping their families, identifying as helpers. And we really felt like the human touch and bringing that human element to the engineering design process was really important. So we have different client cards. So students get the opportunity, instead of just saying, hey, you have to build a pulley that's 20 feet tall, they get to read through different clients who say, I need a pulley for this reason. Can you please help me? And they get to choose which client that they want to help solve. So they're still doing the same engineering and design, but they get a more enriching kind of experience knowing about who their client is and thinking about, how do I create for someone with a specific purpose in mind? Another feature of the guides are something called pláticas, which we have at the beginning and ending of each session. And what these are friendly conversations, is another way to think about them. And they're ways to just kind of, at the beginning and ending of each session, connect students to their funds of knowledge, talk about their funds of knowledge, and then reflect as well at the end of each session on their funds of knowledge. That way students are just still having that, following the steps of our conceptual framework, that opportunity to discover and to feel like their funds of knowledge is valued, and then think about how they're applying them to the design process as well. And then lastly, another feature, each one of the modules comes with their own video. Right here, you see a screen grab from What is a Pulley? So each one has a video which features a Latinx person talking about their engineering experience, to give kids an opportunity to see kind of role models or other people modeling engineering activities or their thoughts on engineering. And it also usually dives into some content area that is relevant to the module to give kids more background information if necessary. Next slide, please. So in addition into producing all these kid-facing materials, we also produced a lot of educator-facing materials for Design Squad Latinx, or PD. We have a online 1-hour training called the Design Squad Latinx training, which is available in both English and Spanish, which is an online self-paced training, which you can go through. And it's everything you would need to know about how to run Design Squad Latinx, from running engineering and design activities to a little bit more background information of funds of knowledge, and just a reminder of all the supports and resources that you have. Within the training are 3 different videos that we produced, and you'll see screen grabs from those below that just give you more helpful tips and tricks and things to keep in mind when you're running a club. So this is really great, especially if it's your first time. Even if it's not your first time, but if it's your first time running engineering and design activities, this training is a great onboarding to give you a lot of background information you might need. In addition to the 1-hour online training, we've also created a series of PD videos, professional development videos, specifically on funds of knowledge, which are hosted by the wonderful Dr. Mejia. Each video, there's 3 of them, focus on a different step of the conceptual framework. So there's funds of knowledge, discover it, funds of knowledge, value it, funds of knowledge, apply it. And it gives you just more background information on funds of knowledge, some examples of what it can look like in the classroom or in your program, as well as some helpful tips for how do you actually bring this approach into your practices as an educator. Next slide, please. So I think that was it, a big overview of both of those programs. I'll say it one more time, Design Squad Maker is currently live on PBS LearningMedia, and you can find all those resources there for free. Design Squad Latinx will be published on PBS LearningMedia, again for free, by the end of this month. And now I'm going to welcome Susie and Alex to our panel discussion. And I have a couple questions to kick it off. But if you have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to add them into the Q&A. Because we'd rather hear from you than continue hearing from me. I think I've talked enough already for this webinar. I'd like to start with you, Susie. Just starting off with, why do you think it's important for kids and families to have access to making opportunities and experiences in engineering design activities? Like, why should we care about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think for young kids especially, one thing that we know from the research that's been done over the last several decades is that from very early on, children learn that they're a sciencey person, or they learn that science is not for them. And those perceptions tend to stick once kids have landed on that perception of themselves. And so I think it's really important to foster kind of underlying habits of mind that are important for any kind of learning, things like collaboration, persistence, creativity, and making is a really good way of doing that, not just within engineering education, but I think across a lot of other disciplines as well. And beyond that, within the Design Squad Maker project, we're thinking about the design process, and we really approach that as a way of solving problems in your everyday life. It's a set of steps that, you can use to solve engineering problems, but you can also use it to solve everyday problems, and to help people and to contribute to your community and all of these other things. And so I think framing it in that way can be really empowering, just to show, we were working with 8 to 11-year-olds, but to show that you can define a problem, you can identify something that's really relevant for you in your life, and then create something to tackle that or to address an issue that you really care about. And so I think making is a really powerful way of getting at both of those things.
Awesome. And then Alex, kind of similarly, like, why is it important to give Latinx youth opportunities in engineering?
Thank you, Nikki. I think that one of the main reasons for it is that Latino, Latina, Latinx youth historically have been marginalized when it comes to engineering. So the numbers are not there, right? We've been talking about this for 50 years and still not a lot has changed. I think that one of the reasons is we are one of the fastest growing minorities in the United States. And I think it's not just for the Latino, Latina, Latinx, Latine youth, but in general for individuals who are growing in a bilingual context, right? I think that it is important to provide opportunities for youth to see themselves reflected in engineering. A lot of the times we don't necessarily see ourselves reflected in the math, the science, or the engineering. And again, it goes back to what you were mentioning, that a lot of the times we're not, a lot of the things that come from communities of color are not valued in formal spaces, like in the classroom, right? And a lot of the times even in informal spaces where certain ways of knowing, doing, and being are the things that we value the most, right? I think that it is also important for Latino, Latina, Latine youth to, and even for facilitators, for instructors, to show a different side of STEM in general, not just engineering, that STEM knowledge is created not just in one language or in one context, but that it happens in a lot of different contexts, that language is not never dissociated from learning STEM content, right? And I think that that is one of the reasons why we need to provide these opportunities to Latino students, but primarily for that youth to see themselves reflected in engineering. And I think that it also gives an opportunity to others to start rejecting some of the deficit perceptions that we have about communities that have been marginalized for a long time. And I think it can open doors for more inclusion and for more diversity in STEM.
Yeah. Along those lines, Susie, this question actually came in from an attendee in the pre-survey, but what about any ideas for effective ways to engage girls in the makerspace, and anything that we saw from Design Squad Maker that you think would be relevant to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think although we weren't focusing on girls specifically, I think throughout all of our work at the New York Hall of Science, at least, we're always thinking about who doesn't feel included in this situation, who might feel excluded in this situation, and how can we open things up a little bit more. And what we found is that as soon as you open up the design of an activity for one group of people who feels marginalized, it also tends to improve the experience for everyone. And so I think, you know, from this project and from others, we found that, you know, giving children a chance to define a problem for themselves that they're interested in, rather than dictating a problem that they need to solve, is one thing that really opens up the learning experience, not just for girls, but for everybody. And we also found, and this seems like a overlap with Design Squad Latinx, that framing engineering as a way of helping people or contributing to your community in some way is a really powerful motivator for a lot of children who might not otherwise feel interested in engineering. And so the app and the way we structured the workshops help children think about who they might want to help with their designs, what kinds of things people might need help with, or even animals might need help with, and to really start with that personal and social relevance. And that's been a really great inclusive approach across genders, across backgrounds.
Awesome. And then Alex, another question related to this for you. We've talked about funds of knowledge a lot in the context of Latinx youth, but is funds of knowledge only applicable to Latinx peoples?
No, it's not. It's not applicable just to Latinx individuals. In fact, everyone has some type of funds of knowledge, right? The important part here of why we focus on Latino students, Latinx students, is because their funds of knowledge, for the most part, have, or historically, have not been given the place and space in STEM conversations, right? So I think that that is kind of the difference that we need to make, and honor those individuals that started to do this work, right? And remember that this work started to or the intent of this work was to get teachers to, again, challenge those deficit notions about Mexican American kids in close to the southwest border, right? Why? Because at the time there was not a lot of access to formal education for these kids, and it was, a lot of the times it was because of segregated schools, right? A lot of Mexican American kids didn't have access to school, and funds of knowledge tried to challenge this idea that households and communities are inadequate at preparing children at a young age, right? So I think we need to remember that, right? And so to answer your question, no, everybody has funds of knowledge, but we focus on marginalized communities because usually their ways of knowing, doing, and being are not necessarily being valued in the spaces or in the discourses about STEM.
Yeah, and along with that, Alex, I'm wondering if you can share, I mean, Design Squad Latinx is obviously a great way to get experience with doing funds of knowledge with engineering, but if you can share just some kind of other practices that can incorporate a funds of knowledge approach into engineering and even STEM education, that would be great.
Yeah, so I think that the first thing is to the first thing to do is to foster that trust with the kids and the communities. A lot of the times we work in communities where we don't live, and that has been kind of like the case for a lot of teachers. So they don't really know, a lot of the times we don't know about the communities that we work with. So it is important to get to know the communities where, you know, that we work with. What are their interests? What are some of their values? You know, the history of the community. I think that that is very important to foster that trust with the community, with the families, and obviously with the kids, right? I think another way to bring forth this funds of knowledge is to see it as an asset-based approach, right? To know that kids or to start reflecting on how the type of knowledge that the kids bring into the classroom or the space where we're working with them, right? That they're not blank slates, but that they're actually come with a lot of knowledge that can be used in very positive ways for learning experiences, particularly in this case, in the work that I do for engineering, right? I can tell you, for example, of a project where I had teachers working with and bilingual teachers working with students, and they prepare lessons where they integrated language and STEM content. And I see language as a font of knowledge, for example, right? That language allows the kids to gather information, right? To process information, to synthesize information about the different things that they're doing, right? So that's even just one way to start, integrating funds of knowledge into your own classroom, right? Try to provide those or open the spaces for those linguistic practices to actually happen. Another way is for teachers to start reflecting on what are some of the practices that they engage in the classroom, and being willing to cross traditional personal and professional boundaries a lot of times, right? To try to think about how they see their own students, right? Am I seeing my students as active participants in my classroom, or do I see them as just receiving knowledge from me? I think that also is a way to try to adapt or adopt an asset-based perspective to teaching or to engaging in STEM practices. And at the same time, that's going to allow for you to start seeing what those funds of knowledge are that the kids are coming with, right? So recognizing the knowledge that exists in the community, bringing in people from the community, right, to share their own expertise in the classroom, what they do, how they do it, family members, inviting them into the conversations of the things that they're learning, right, and seeing learning about new ways of knowing, doing, and being in the classroom. I think that those are some really fast, quick ways of how you can integrate funds of knowledge into your program.
It's so wonderful, Alex. Thank you so much. And something you said at the beginning kind of stuck with me about just communicating with the communities and the families that you're working with. And Susie, I wanted to turn it back over to you because I know Design Squad Maker took a lot of time to gather a lot of feedback from caregivers, from makerspaces and things like that. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on why that was so important and why we took so much time to do that, and how you think that kind of impacted the program that we ended up developing with Design Squad Maker.
Yeah, we had done some interviews with families very early on in the project just to find out if they had any experiences with engineering or design hands-on projects prior to attending our workshops, or if this was sort of their first experience. And then because we were trying to connect an experience that families had together within a makerspace to things that they might be able to do at home, of course, we need to make sure that any supports that we're giving are, number one, relevant to people's lives, and number two, approachable and usable for them. And so we were trying to understand, what are the barriers, the challenges that families face if they aren't really doing engineering design kinds of projects yet, and what kind of supports would they like to have. And then we incorporated those into the first iterations of the workshop and got more feedback along the way. But I think, I think the feedback that we got throughout that process was about kind of the importance of setting some expectations at the beginning about why is the engineering design process even a thing that we should learn about at all. And so a lot of our materials start out just from there, like this is a problem-solving process that anyone can use to solve any kind of problem. And there's steps that you can follow to like get from an idea to a design. And like just that by itself, I think was really like eye-opening for a lot of people who are kind of new to this kind of experience. And we also found that like allowing children and giving them some support to take their own idea and develop a design from that was actually something that was really rewarding for both kids and for the caregivers who were there with them, to see how children kind of narrow down on a problem that they were interested in solving, and then their brainstorming process to come up with solutions, and then just how motivated they were to keep working on their designs. And so we kept that element and just built up more supports around it with things like the themes for the workshops. So thinking about what can you design for your home, what could you design for your school, for animals that you like or that you have at home as pets, and things like that, to try to figure out how much scaffolding do kids need, how much support do caregivers need, to make that feel approachable. I think for the take-home resources, we tried to just make sure that there were a lot of options. So we heard from families that they often didn't have a lot of time. They were worried they didn't have enough materials or the right materials or enough space. And so the take-home activities are trying to break down each one of those things. Like if you feel like you don't have materials, here's a scavenger hunt that you can do at home to find anything you have around your house that you can build with. If you don't have a space, here are some options for spaces, or here's some activities that you can just do with a paper and pencil that don't really need any space. And so we tried to have a lot of different permutations of different activities and tools that families could use based on what works best for them, so that we weren't putting caregivers in a position where they had to say no or couldn't do it. We were always giving them a way to say yes.
Awesome. So we're running out of time here. So I just have one more question for both of you, starting with you, Susie. I would just love to know if you have any tips for someone starting with Design Squad Maker, like if you have the biggest tip for using the program, and if you want to share maybe one of your favorite resources or activities found within the program. I think that would be great.
That's a good question. I think my biggest tip would be for someone who's just thinking about facilitating these programs, to try creating a project for yourself, like imagining that you were a participant in the workshop, like actually create a prototype, look around your house for stuff that you have, find some recyclables, some paper and cardboard and whatever, and actually go through the whole process, because I think we found that was really illuminating when you then are facilitating, to have some examples to draw on and like decisions that you had to make yourself. And I think one of my favorite resources in the toolkit is the set of roles for caregivers. We found that it was really helpful to give adults who are participating with their children some idea of ways that they could participate, but of course we wanted to be inclusive and flexible and make sure that we weren't trying to communicate that there was only one way that adults could be involved. So we have a whole set of different ways that adults can be involved, from documenting what children are creating, to helping them test their designs, to just offering encouragement if they're fine on their own. And I think that was really helpful in creating some openings for adults to feel like they could be involved, but didn't have to be involved in one kind of way or another. And those can apply to caregivers, but I think also they could apply to educators as well.
Sure. And then Alex, same question for you. Do you have a favorite either resource or feature of Design Squad Latinx? And do you have a tip for someone who might just be starting with Design Squad Latinx?
I mean, I worked on it, so I'm going to say everything is good. I would say that the videos that we created over the summer are very good. I think that the modules that were created also during the first stage of the program, they're also very good. They tend to be very concise, I think, in the sense that it talks very clear about how you can try to get the kids to be interested in having these conversations about funds of knowledge as they walk throughout their own community, right? Like around the block. I think that that's a really great way to get started. For facilitators and for teachers, I would say that reading some of there's a lot of articles out there, right, that talk about funds of knowledge. But for me, one of the individuals who has done like really, really good work on it is Luis Moll and Norma Gonzalez. So I think that they have really great resources. They've done really great job. And yeah, I guess.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for your time and for sharing your infinite wisdom with us. I truly, truly appreciate it. And I'll now turn it back over to Carolyn.
Thank you. Such a wealth of knowledge. And Nikki, before you mute your microphone, just remind people of what they will find on PBS Learning Media now, and then
Yes.
what is
What is
coming.
Yes, currently on PBS Learning Media, you can find the Design Squad Maker Collection, which includes the entire facilitation guide and all of the resources available to you for that program. And the app is available for download at Apple App and Google Play stores. Again, everything for free. Design Squad Latinx, that collection will be published on PBS Learning Media by the end of this month, where you will find all of the activity modules as well as all of the professional development resources too, and videos, all of the things.
Great, and thank you. All right, let me first remind everyone, or if you weren't here at the beginning, that obviously the chat was unfortunately disabled tonight. I really don't know why, but I'll investigate why. And so I hope that you've been able to post some questions in the Q&A. You will have my email address, and you're welcome to email me with any questions you have, and I will direct them to the right person to get a response. I'm just going to quickly flip through some slides that you will have access to. A link to the shared slide deck along with the resource document and the recording, and also the survey will come out to you in an email tomorrow. It comes out to everyone who registered, and you're welcome to share that with your colleagues also. So these are just some examples of collections of resources similar to Design Maker and Design Latinx that will be on PBS Learning Media. These are already published on PBS Learning Media. And so, and you'll have the links to all of these collections in that resource document that I mentioned. Bringing the Universe to America's Classrooms is really a fabulous collection on PBS Learning Media. It was a collaboration between NASA and GBH to create Earth and space science resources for K-12, and they are fabulous. It was a 5-year project. We used NASA data, NASA images, and created wonderful resources. So if you teach topics of weather, climate, the solar system, the water cycle, etc., please check that out. We record all of our webinars, and they're available on our GBH Education YouTube channel. And I just wanted to call attention to 2 in particular that we ran last year that we're particularly proud of and would probably be appropriate for the age group that you work with. Indigenous Cultural and Informational Text Resources from Molly of Denali, and also Social, Emotional, and Citizenship Resources from Arthur. And the recording links to those you will have, and they're also on our YouTube channel. Coming soon in October is a new program that will be on PBS stations around the country, Rosie's Rules. And Work It Out Wombats is another new program produced by GBH, and that is coming in the winter of 2023. This is our post-webinar survey. We invite you to give us feedback at when you complete the survey. You are welcome to download a certificate of attendance. I think I can post in the chat and everyone can see it. I think that's the way it's working tonight. Let me just make note of this, and I'll post this in the chat because I know people like to do the survey right away. Okay, and last but not least, Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, Susie and Alex, Lisa for hanging in there on the chat that wasn't working, and Nikki for leading us through this. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for the work that you do and for joining us this evening. I'll put the survey link in the chat. The Q&A is still open, and you have my email address to shoot me an email, and I'll get you a response to any questions you have. And thank you again very much. If any of the presenters have any final comments, feel free to chime in, and then we'll close out the room in a minute.
I just wanted to say, and I don't know if this came through or not through the chat, but if you have, questions about how to implement, because I know it was very superficial, right? On some of the comments, but if you're interested in learning more about funds of knowledge or integrated into your classroom, also feel free to reach out. I work with different schools and school districts, and I'm always happy to collaborate with others.
Alex, could you, let's see, if you wanted to post your email or however you'd like people to contact you, I think you could private message me if you're not able to post to everyone, and I'll post it to everyone.
Sure. It's pretty easy. It's pretty much my name.
Go ahead. Yeah, Alex.
alex.mejia@utsa.edu, but I'll put it here on the chat too in case people can't actually see it.
Sure. Would you spell your last name again for me, please?
M as in mom, E-J-I-A.
Okay. Alex.mejia at
UTSA.
I got it. Yep.
.edu.
Great. Okay. I hope everyone can see that. All right. Okay. Wonderful job, everyone. We're just 2 minutes over our time limit. Thank you very, very much again. Have a great year, everyone, and hope to see you back for another webinar that we do. Look forward to hearing also comments about the work that you saw tonight when you get a chance to use the resources. Thanks, everyone. Good night.